What if it rained food? What if Earth was a cube? What if we had 9 lives? What if bits could fly? It's absurd. If money grew on trees, if we didn't have knees, if we walked through life slightly magnetical, it's absurd. Absurd Hypotheticals.
Hello everybody and welcome to Absurd Hypotheticals, the show where we overthink dumb questions so you don't have to. I'm your host Marcus Lehner, and I'm joined here today by Chris Yee and Ben Storms. Say hi, guys.
Hey, I'm Chris.
Hey, I'm Ben.
And I don't know if my voice actually sounds different, but it feels like my voice sounds different right now. I've been doing a lot of talking. I went to a board game convention over the weekend in Hartford. Well, it's actually a comic convention that had a board game section that I was in. But it was Kineticon, and I was part of the CT Fig indie games section of that.
FIG stands for Festival of Indie Games. For
Yes,
the uninitiated.
thank you.
Yep, here to help.
CT stands for Connecticut.
Connecticut.
Also, for the uninitiated, is that like, it's not a cult, Ben. It's not like, we're not sacrificing virgins or anything.
Right, I'm sorry, I forgot they made a sign of things saying we wouldn't call it a cult, so you're right, it's not a cult.
Yeah, it's no longer a cult.
Yep.
It specifically says in the intro, it's not a cult, which is very strange, but they want to be clear.
CT stands for cult.
Yeah.
So, anyhow, in addition to, so this was a 3-day convention, as opposed to the 1-day convention I've done in the past.
Ooh, that's long. Did you stay, down there?
Yeah, so I was staying at my sister's place. She has a place in Connecticut. And so it was I was there 11 to 7 on Friday, 9 to 7 on Saturday, and then 10:30 to 4 on Sunday.
That's
So
a lot.
that was a lot. In addition, the game I brought, which, why not, I'll do my little pitch right here, is Octo Chef. It is the frantic cooperative cooking game where each person makes up 1/4 of the Octo Chef who has risen from the sea to open up his beachside sandwich shop. And for those of you familiar with the video game Overcooked, it's basically that in card game form. It's played in real time against the clock, and so and you have to work together to get ingredients. So people are shouting I need onions, I need a burger, I need to cook this, pass me this, who needs this?
Ends up getting really chaotic.
Really chaotic, lots of shouting, and usually to make the numbers work, usually more than half the time I'm also playing the game. So I was doing, in addition to pitching my game and selling my game and talking to people, also just my game was constant shouting. So it was the first day at Friday, I actually specifically stopped on my way home to pick up cough drops, not because I had a cold, just because my throat was so raw already. And then I had 2 more days of that. And then on Monday I went to work, made a bunch of phone calls there, and then went to my local Boston board game group and played my game again.
And now you hate your game.
and now it's today, and now I went to work again, and now I'm doing this podcast, and we're going to be recording a second episode after this for our special behind the scenes Patreon episode. So I'm going to be doing another straight 4 hours of talking. And
So that's going to happen a lot.
Yep, that's kind of the end result here.
Good thing you're our host.
Right.
Yeah, good thing.
The person who has to talk the least on most podcasts.
So yeah, I my voice, my instrument is strained, but still here. I'm very excited to record today. It ended up being a very good weekend. My game actually won an award for best family game. Ooh. Out of whatever few dozen games that were there being showcased, which was awesome.
Was that audience voted?
No, so that wasn't audience choice. They had judges that went around and played everybody's game.
Oh, okay.
But people were definitely into the game. I had a lot of repeat players. I was answering a couple fan emails this morning, which was really cool. And yeah, that felt really good. So if you're a fan of this podcast, send us fan email. That shit's awesome. It makes us us feel so disproportionately good to the minute that you guys spend writing that email, because it's oh my god, people actually listen to the thing I do. So yeah, that was my weekend. I was 1/4 of an octopus for most of it, and I yelled a lot.
In theory, playing a game all day sounds really fun, but playing it all day for 3 days straight, and you have to play because you're there for it.
Well, it's not so much about the playing the game. It's you have a booth at a convention, so you actually have to actively
engage
with people, kind of get them over to your booth, and then you do the spiel for your game, and so you have to learn how to explain it, and you end up explaining it the same way every time. So you just have this script.
You did that. Yeah, you did your spiel pretty good for us.
Yeah, there's the yeah, there's that, a lot of practice, and then the actual rules explanation I can now do in like, a third of the time I could do it, starting Friday morning.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a lot of fun. If any listeners have an opportunity to go to one of these like indie game conventions, they're a really like positive space. Like it's really fun to do. Like people are just there because they love making and playing games, and it's all good vibes. So I'm over the moon right now. Over the moon. Speaking of moons, our question has nothing to do with moons, and it is: what if you had to make every decision with a coin flip?
Moons are circles.
That was a non-traditional segue.
Coins are circles.
How did you relate the prior topic to the new one by talking about how unrelated it is? That's like new ground.
Yeah, I took an unrelated, like, what do you call it? Idiom? I took an unrelated idiom and then said it was unrelated and then used that as my segue, which just means I've become an absolute pro host and you guys should be happy to have me.
See, I feel like that's cheating, though, because you can do that with literally anything.
It's true.
But the thing is, no, you can't, because if you do that every time, then everyone's like, this guy doesn't know how to do segues. You have to use it only the perfect amount of times.
And they think, this time this guy didn't know how to do a segue.
Do it every 56 episodes.
Precisely every 56.
You guys just don't know how hard it is to do segues. They're not easy.
They're not.
I know, I hosted one episode. It was
hard.
hard.
You did! You just hosted it's the previous episode to this one.
Yeah.
It was the first one I missed. Very sad. How'd your segues go, Chris? I haven't listened yet.
It was okay. it was difficult.
When you say they were about 50-50? Because speaking of things that are about 50-50, how about those coin flips we're going to talk about in our question? Boom!
I like that you segued into it and then I segued out of it.
Got us back in. Good segue. Kind of. Anyway.
We got a good segue rhythm going. But yes, what if you had to make every decision with a coin flip? So this question was a bit weird to set up with our parameters wise, because there's a lot of gray area about what counts as a decision and what you can resolve with the coin flip. So what we did is we decided that it was going to be anytime you have a binary decision, like this or that, yes or no, and you're constantly thinking about it, give it a flip, and that's what you do. So if you have something like ordering something off a menu, you have plenty of options. But if you're stuck between two, then you would flip a coin. But generally, like, you can make general decisions. Anything you couldn't solve with a coin flip without having to do like, well, if I flip 4 coins, I could theoretically choose between these 8 things.
Just gets way too complicated.
Yeah. There's still definitely some gray area about what counts as one decision, but I'm going to kind of get into a little bit of that. And so I'm going to start us off because I kind of covered more general daily life stuff and what some obvious good and bad case scenarios might be for flipping coins. So my first thing what I thought of when I was going about the coin flips is traveling, where my office is X distance away. If I get in my car and I get to an intersection, I'm going to count it as a decision about which direction I go.
Technically 3 choices.
Yeah, so technically the way I handled it is that there's like this one. I'm going to go directly against the things I was saying about whether you wouldn't have a series of coin flips.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like you have to decide if you turn and then whether you go left or right. But I thought it was an interesting enough problem. And this is actually a well-solved problem mathematically. So I actually took this course in college, but have since forgotten everything about it. They're called Markov chains is the math if you are interested in looking it up.
Oh, I love Markov chains.
Yeah, it's about the probability of like when you do one thing and then now you're like in a different position, but you still have like similar choices, and it's a chain of events, and it's the probability of reaching a certain point after that chain of events. And there's a whole bunch of different math you can do into this Markov chain to make all these crazy probabilities. But they answer questions like, if my work is this far away, what's the chances I even make it to work if I spend this much time trying to go there? So that was my first question answered. So if I live 10 blocks from work, so like 10 intersections between me and the office, and I give myself enough time to make 100 turns. So I hit an intersection 100 times and make a decision. I only have a 7.3% chance of actually making it to work in those 100 turns. So you're going to want to live close to your office. And it gets much worse if you are 10 blocks away is like a 7% chance. If you live 20 blocks away and make 100 turns, you have a less than 1% chance to make it to work.
In 100 intersections.
In 100 intersections. But here's the thing. the distance matters a lot more than the amount of turns you make. If you go from 100 turns to 1,000 turns and you're 20 blocks away, you only increase your odds from 0.7% to 2.7%. So if you give yourself time to hit 1,000 intersections, which is gonna take a while.
That's a lot of intersections.
Like, well, how many seconds are in a day?
We can do that real quick.
There's 86,000 seconds in a day. So if it takes you 30 seconds, which is kind of, optimistic about from intersection to intersection, it's going to take you half your day to just do that. It's going to be like 6 hours just to do 1,000 turns.
You have an excuse for being late.
Do you, though?
I guess, no, your excuse is that you were flipping coins.
Sorry I'm late. Every time I hit an intersection, I decide to flip a coin to see which direction I would go. And I did that for 4 hours, and now I'm here. I got lucky today. Tomorrow might be worse.
And your boss was like, oh, okay, I understand.
I was about to say that I feel like you'd bring this up in your interview, but you would never ever bring this up in an interview because I feel like this is going to make you not get hired literally anywhere.
Yeah, that makes you basically unemployable. But if you live less blocks away, you can do it. 100 turns is reasonable. You could leave like an hour and a half to do like your 10-minute drive.
Well, even if you live like on the same block, if you live like next door, you're like, when you leave your house, you have to decide left or right.
And so here's the thing too. Is you only have, say you're trying to go 20 blocks away. You have a 0.7% chance. It also means that if you fail even you're 10 blocks away from work and end up 20 blocks away from your place, it's going to take you a long, long time to find your way back home again.
Right.
Because then that's your starting point.
Yeah, the math says that eventually you should hit your origin point again, but this is like taking the limit as you take infinite turns. So you can very easily end up very far away and have basically a 0% chance to ever make it back to your house. So if you consider, so this is where the little gray area is about our setup, is if you consider every turn you make while traveling a coin flip choice, you're basically fucked, because you could go anywhere and all it takes is like 3 bad flips and you're just gone. You're just gone. You are gone, lost in the world.
Work from home.
Exactly. So I took a step back and I'm like, all right, let's say more reasonable decisions are the coin flips. One thing I found interesting is that people are really bad about picturing what random results look like. So if you flipped 100 coins, what do you think the largest amount of heads you would get in a row is?
I mean, I'd guess. Okay, well, hold on. Okay, because I feel this actually does affect the probability. Heads specifically, or just the same result.
Let's say heads specifically.
Okay, heads specifically in a row.
Heads specifically in a row.
5.
I'd say more like 7 or 8.
Yeah, so Ben's closer. So the expected value is 6, but like up to 9 is not like unreasonable. So they'll like, a lot of professors, what they'll do when they teach this is they'll have half the class like do a computer randomized 100 heads tails,
mm-hmm.
and then have the other half of the class just write what they think a random distribution is,
and they'll like alternate.
Yeah, and they alternate too much, so you can actually tell them by sight which ones are actually random, which ones aren't, because true random looks much different than fake random, like
it's
what
cool,
we expect random
it's
to
a
be.
Classic. I answered A for the last 2, so I'm going to answer B.
Yeah, because it can't possibly be 3 A's in a row. So we have a real tough time in accepting that 5 heads in a row is random and just as random and fine as 5 tails, because it feels like it's less likely to get 5 heads, but it's not. So this got me thinking. You're going to be flipping a lot of coins. Researchers at Cornell University estimated that the average adult makes about 35,000 remotely conscious decisions each day. So that's a lot of decisions. We're going to be flipping a lot of coins. Let's say half of those are like conscious binary decisions that we make, like this or that, yes or no. With that, over our lifespan, say over 60 years, you will be making 766.5 million decisions with coin flips.
It's a lot of coins.
Okay.
And so with that big number, the expected value of your largest sequence of consecutive heads or tails is 27.5. So I was kind of looking at somewhere in your life, you are going to hit these sequences of a lot of heads or tails in a row. And so where could you hit these, and what would those effects be? So let's go like very basic daily life stuff. The first thing that I do in the morning is that my alarm goes off and I'm faced with my first decision of the day. It's whether to hit snooze or get up. So if you look at just the if you flip for the 100 coin flip, so this is going to be happen fairly frequently. On average, there'll be a good number of mornings where I hit snooze 6 times in a row. And my snooze button defaults to a 9-minute long snooze, which seems like a really weird number to me. Like, why isn't it 10 or
10?
5 or something? But 9 is the amount of minutes that my snooze button is. So if I hit that string of tails 6 times, I'm an hour late. And that's going to be not super infrequent. So that's going to suck. I can set my alarm earlier, but then there's a lot of times where I'll be getting up very early. And I don't want to deal with that. That's crazy. If I hit my lifetime 28 tails, now I'm 4.5 hours late, which obviously is not good.
It's only going to happen once, though.
Right. So, but probably not, life-changing. So, like, that's probably one of the more tame scenarios. Another funny one I was thinking of is, say you're at a fast food drive-thru. So we were talking before about what you eat usually isn't binary, but when you're going through a drive-thru, they'll inevitably ask something to the effect of, does that complete your order, or is there anything else, which is definitely a binary decision.
This is true.
So if you're at Burger King, the cheapest menu item is $1. So I assume once you say, no, that doesn't complete my order, you can get whatever you want. So again, it's not a very bad worst case scenario, but if you hit your 28 tails in a row over here, you're stuck in that loop 28 times, and you're only out about $30, but you now have 28 extra cheeseburgers that you really don't know what to do with.
And the person's going to think you're weird because you're going to wait for them to ask if you want something else.
Actually, I would like one more cheeseburger.
Is that your complete order?
Actually, I would like one more cheeseburger.
Yeah, it's going to be a couple awkward social interactions there.
Could I please get one more cheeseburger?
One thing, too, with probability is that these consecutive decisions don't have to be like the 28. It doesn't have to be your next 28 decisions. It could, like, probability-wise, it's the same difference as this particular decision I make, fairly often, 28 times in a row, it ends up being heads. For example, like when I get up in the morning, I do consider it a decision whether I shower. 95% of the time the answer is yes, but like 5% of the times it's like fuck it. Problem is that's my decision. If it's the coin's decision, it's now 50-50. And you're going to be a gross human being if you decide 28 times in a row you're not going to shower that day.
I guess that happens for a lot of things, like eating, right?
Yeah, like deciding whether you're going to eat. I guess 28 times, not eating a meal 28 times puts you out
probably survive.
9 days. You could survive. I also feel like you're going to be deciding whether you're going to eat or not more often if you're not eating.
Yeah.
If you're very, very hungry. So that's a little bit of a gray area. But you probably wouldn't die for that particular reason. So there's a lot of little things like this that make tiny social situations awkward. And I didn't really touch on the fact that just there's a lot of big decisions you make in your life on a yes or no, on this or that, or yes or no, that you wouldn't normally make with a coin, that you might, like, whether you buy that house, or whether you, like, get that car, or whether you do sign up for that, timeshare.
Oh my god. Imagine getting married and how stressful that moment is.
Yeah, so really the biggest problem is going to be other people in your life. Because one thing is that it's going to be very easy for people to see that this is what you're doing with all your decisions. See that that's how you decide literally everything. So what if somebody asks for $10?
Yeah, I get asked for money all the time because I live in the city.
And then they ask you for $10 again. And then they ask you for $10 again. And then they ask you for $10 again.
You got to keep this thing a secret. You can't let people know this. You have to do it.
But there's absolutely no way to do that.
Well, you could just be like, hey, it's the weird guy that flips a coin. But you don't have to be like, I have to do it. I just choose to do it.
Yeah, but like, even jokingly, if she's like, every time someone asks you something, you flip a coin, they'll be like, oh yeah, can I have $10? And then you flip the coin, and then if you get tails, you give it to them. They're gonna be like, can I have $10?
Yeah, they're gonna try it again, I guess.
And so, like, if you know a shitty person, they could bankrupt you. But I think before that happens, at a certain point, after you've given this guy probably like $250, you're gonna ask yourself, do I need to just kill this guy? And 50-50, you're going to have to try and get away with murder, which, given how you make decisions, is going to be very problematic.
How often do you ask yourself, should I kill this guy?
Well, I mean, if this guy is abusing my, I don't know what you would call it, my hypothetical situation to steal $250 from me in $10 increments, because it's probably going to be like, he's asked me 70 times already, and I've given him like, hundreds of dollars, and he's not stopping. I would consider it. Like, you have to get out of that loop somehow.
He is affecting your livelihood.
And even if you as a person would say that's like a 0.001% chance I would say yes to that, and a 99.99% chance I won't murder this guy, the odds are now 50-50. So that's not obvious. That's like a very, like, anyone can abuse your coin flipping power. But it might be even worse for the people that that aren't trying to abuse it, and that there's just misunderstandings. Because, look, if we loop back around to relationships, like, will you go out with me? Coin flip doesn't really end well in either direction, whether you say yes or no. Never mind, say, like, the marriage proposal, like, will you marry me? Hold on, let me flip a coin. No.
Well, you think that if they got that far in the relationship, they would know that this is the thing that you do.
So here's the thing, like, you start a relationship, and maybe this is your 28. The first 28 times someone asks you if you want to hang out and go on a date, you say yes. 28 dates is already a pretty committed relationship. Like, if you go on one date, like, you know, maybe like once every other week even, that's like a year that you've now been dating this person whenever they ask.
Yeah, I guess they wouldn't have seen you flip the coin for those first few dates.
Yeah, and then even like, oh, you know, there's a few no's in between. If you do like 20 yeses, like, how many no's before they realize it's random? Like, you could definitely end up in a relationship that you're not super enthused about, but it looks like you are because you keep making all these choices to continue it.
Or you could wind up in multiple relationships at the same time because you can't say no sometimes.
That is not good. That is very not good.
I mean, they probably would see you flipping the coin physically at some point.
At some point, yeah. Which might end the relationship.
Yeah, it's going to be tough really having any kind of consistent social interactions with anybody because, like, obviously, you don't give a shit about anything because you just flip a coin for it. That's pretty much what I got. I was looking a little bit into how advertising might affect you. So I was trying to see if there's good numbers on how many ads like that like ask you to buy something in a day. But the only numbers I could find were how many advertisements you see, which counted like, you know, logos and brands and everything, of which there was like you see an average of 5,000 ads in a day, the average adult, which is an insane number.
We sort of covered that in one of our other episodes. What if you bought everything you saw an ad for?
Yeah, ages back we did what if you had to buy everything you saw an ad for?
I forget what the outcome of that was.
I think it wasn't great.
I think we decided you had to live on a boat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was Ben's answer.
Yeah, my answer picture is like Jason boring it, but
yeah, getting off the grid.
Jason boring.
And then the last note I have here is just like, it's gonna be tough to install any software because you have to sign like 3 or 4, like, say yes, I read this, and so it's gonna take you like on average like, you know, 10 to 15 tries to actually like download any software, which is gonna be a slight annoyance on top of everything else.
I've never hit the disagree button.
it just closes the installer. That's all it does.
Oh,
You can open it back up.
it doesn't self-destruct.
Yeah, it doesn't like wipe your hard drive.
It destroys your computer. It's like, you fool. But that just about does it for just the basic daily life problems that I decided to explore. Ben, what problems did you explore with this scenario?
So I wanted to have a little more fun. So I looked at gambling. Because this is a great way to make binary decisions that you have no control over, is by giving away large amounts of money.
Also relevant because the giant Encore casino just opened up in our backyard.
That is true. Conveniently has not affected my
We weren't
traffic,
paid to
but
say that.
It may
Can
have
we get
affected
paid to
yours.
say that?
Only people in Massachusetts will know what you're talking about.
It's also true. It's a casino. It's called Encore. Boom. You all know now. So the assumption I made, I kind of just looked at like within the games themselves. I didn't look at like if you would leave the table after a hand, because like you don't get asked that. It's kind of just sort of assume that you will leave if you do. And I took a little. I sort of went into the whole question as more if you were like directly given a binary option, not as much like more decision-y things. If that makes sense.
Right.
So a lot of things, actually, there's a few options you have that don't actually really change, which is cool. Still play slots. No choices there. Why would you play slots?
Yeah.
You just pull a lever. It's all you do. Don't play slots. You can do roulette because you have like a bunch of options and you just pick one of them and then someone does something and you might win money. Why would you play roulette either? I don't know. I'm not a big fan of gambling. That might sort of come through in some of my answer.
Don't some casinos have war?
Yeah, I actually found that out while I was it's not exactly the same. It's just like regular, like, you know, Boy Scout camping trip war. It's slightly different because you have to like
They favor it towards the house.
yeah well and it's like if your card is higher you win, but if it's lower you can go to war by like doubling your bet and you go again. Or it's weird. It's really weird. I learned about a few fun gambling games that I did decide not to go into just because they're weird and no one plays them. Well, people play them, but like they're less well known. But yeah, so you can play roulette still. Craps. So I have craps with a question mark on my notes because fuck craps, and the rules for craps are impossible.
I love craps.
I fucking hate craps.
I went to a casino once, and craps was the one game I played.
Like, it's not okay. The problem with craps, and this is one of the things I learned, I was like, oh yeah, you totally make a decision when you make zero decisions when you play craps.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, it's literally
Craps isn't about the decisions, Ben. It's about the feel of the table because everybody wins at the same time, so everyone gets very excited
that's
at the
true.
same time.
That's
It's
cool.
the one they show in all the movies.
I guess. Yeah.
And you get to feel like James Bond, and it's just you get to share and joy. That's what gambling's all about.
Well, anyway, you can still play it, so you got that going for you. But let's get to the ones that are you know, well-known ones that are pretty well affected. Poker, for the most part, you can actually still play because almost all the time you're playing poker, you have at least 3 choices. So you can always either check or fold, call or raise. So as long as you have those 3 options, and I guess technically you have 4 of them at some times, you're golden. You can actually just play poker. The exception is, there are a couple of exceptions. One, if someone bets enough to bring you all in, all you can do is call or fold.
That's the
that's
biggest
no good.
decision.
And if only you and one other player is left in the hand and they go all in, no matter what, your only options are to call or fold. If someone else is still there, you can start a side pot, so you can still raise, but if it's just you and them, it's that 50-50. So you can mostly play poker, however...
Except for the hands that count.
well, the problem is that, like, I honestly think it wouldn't be that big of a problem. Okay, it'll be pretty bad. The big issue is something that you sort of brought up, Marcus. People are going to eventually realize specifically the all-in thing, and they're going to think it's just you being weird. Because, like, there'll be definitely times when you go all in that you definitely should not go all in.
Yeah.
You go in with, like a 2-7 offsuit or something, and like, huh, okay. But, you can kind of play poker, but you really shouldn't. So the place where it actually starts getting interesting, first one I looked at was sports betting. I was going to do prop bets because prop bets are really fun, but it was hard to find a good listing of prop bets that actually had results for them. Prop bets, if you aren't aware, are basically generally like one side or the other bets with like an over or under attached or something on sporting events. But most importantly, for big events like the Super Bowl, there are all these super bonkers prop bets. Or people will bet on like how long the national anthem singer takes to sing the national anthem, or like what color their hair is, or if they're wearing pants or a skirt. I'm not joking. These are all actual prop bets that existed for the Super Bowl this year.
Is prop short for something?
Proposition.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There was a prop bet for how many times Trump would tweet during the Super Bowl this year. There were some just absolute like ridiculous ones that I love the idea that there's these like quants in Vegas who are coming up with lines for like, you know, which Maroon 5 song they're going to sing first during the halftime show. Once again, an actual prop bet for the Super Bowl.
What I think is important to note about these prop bets too is not that it's not just that they have funny things that are like, oh, you know, 50-50, this one or that one. There's odds for these.
Right, exactly.
They like a real bookie has come up with odds about whether it's gonna be like pants or a skirt on the singer. Like that's somehow they did that, and they have a lot riding on it probably.
The funniest thing to me too is that there's one that's always there that is the most like, if you bet on this, you're like the most ridiculous degenerate gambler ever. There was a prop bet at the Super Bowl for what the opening coin toss lands on. You get less than 50-50 odds to bet on it.
Oh no.
I don't know. Anyway, I couldn't get that like a good source on that, so what I did instead was look at baseball money lines. So money line is basically, it's just like the odds that a team, you know, one of the teams wins the game. So it's given as either a positive number 100 or higher, or a negative number lower than negative 100. So the positive one means that if you bet $100, you'd win that much. So if the odds are plus 160, bet $100, you get $160 back plus your initial bet. If they were negative 160, you have to bet $160 to win 100. Makes sense.
Got it.
So I took all of the results for June 14th, which had 19 games. You might be asking, how are the 19 games? There were somehow 4 double headers, which seemed like a lot, but whatever. I don't know. Took all the odds for that game, or that day, and I actually wrote a little script that would basically pick a random side for each game and then figure out what your winnings would be at the end of the day, assuming you made a $10 bet on each one. Obviously, this is entirely hypothetical because you wouldn't have to go to a bookie and do this, but I wanted to see how
also,
it would
our
turn out.
podcast is hypothetical.
Well, yeah, so whatever. Anyway, so I did that, ran it 1,000,000 times because I'm extra. And the average amount you would lose is $15, which is actually less than I expected. Like, that's not that bad, all things considered. But I think that sort of makes sense, sort of like when you think about the way they set the lines, that's kind of the expected, amount that's going to the house.
But still, $15 is like on a million entries?
Yeah, No, sorry. That was the average loss. Yeah. Twice you lost.
Oh, right.
There were
what was your total bet?
There were
19 times 10, 190, $15?
There were
Okay, yeah.
There were 2 times in that million where it lost everything.
What?
Yep.
Love it.
And then there were 3 times where it won the maximum possible, which for that day was like $159. And I figured out basically how frequently you would lose money, break even, or win money. You would lose money just over 64% of the time, break even like 0.004% of the time, and win money 35.8% of the time. So basically, in case you couldn't figure this out on your own, if you have this, don't bet on things. It's a bad idea. It's not going to go well for you. Why would you expect it to go well for you?
Well, I mean, odds are 50-50, Ben.
They're not. Anyway. And finally, the last one.
Never tell me the odds.
The last one. That's all this is telling you the odds. All of this question is telling you odds. Anyway. Last one is blackjack. So I'm actually really sad about this one. Blackjack gets super complicated because, like, the entirety of blackjack is a series of binary decisions. And I literally tried to just figure out the probability if you started with, like, a given combined value, what your probability of winning was. And I realized that the math on just given like a fixed starting point is super complicated, because it's basically going back to your Markov chains example before. It's an absurdly complicated Markov chain.
Yeah, it gets up there real quick.
How many decisions would you say are per game?
So basically you get 2 cards and you have to decide if you're going to. So if you have 21, you're good, you're done. But then you have to decide whether you stay or hit. And normally, sort of the way that you generally if you have like 17 or higher, you generally stay because those are numbers where you can beat the dealer without them busting. Less than that, you'll generally hit because it's pretty unlikely the dealer busts like ever. I have the odds on that. It's not great. Actually, I guess they bust 28% of the time, roughly, which isn't great. But the problem is that, like, with every card, you have to redo this decision. And then it just it's this super complicated cascading probability problem. So what I wanted to do if I had more time, and I think I'm going to do and then write up the results of it, is write another simulation of that. I started doing a little bit, but I had to do something for work over the weekend. I couldn't devote as much time as I wanted to it.
Come on, the podcast. More important.
No, this isn't the podcast. This is Ben being a big
Yeah,
nerd.
this is actually just me being a huge nerd at this point. Like, I'm not gonna argue that one whatsoever.
I mean, that's basically what our podcast is, just us being big nerds about things. So it's not like it's
Right,
like if they're not separate.
That's true. But I'm probably going to do that and put it up when this episode goes up, put it on Facebook.
It might already be up by the time these people are listening to this episode.
Hopefully it is, or else I'm slacking.
Good work or shitty work, Ben.
Yeah.
It'll probably be on the Facebook group, right?
Yes, on the Facebook, on
Hypotheticals.
Absurd Hypotheticals, yeah. But I will say that from my like initial looking at it, most of the time the way you're going to win is by you not busting, which is already kind of a somewhat iffy proposition. It's not awful because there's a 50% chance that you're not going to bust at least at all times, but it's pretty likely that to win you're going to have the dealer bust, which only happens, like I said, about 28% of the time. So your odds, which normally in blackjack are pretty decent for a casino game, are actually really, really, really bad.
Yeah, they're probably like sub 20 or so.
Oh, definitely sub 20. I'm really hoping there are actual ads on the Facebook group, or actual odds on the Facebook group when this goes up, so you can see just how bad they are.
I want to figure this out real quickly and make a prediction. Okay, so you said there's a 25.8% chance the dealer busts.
28.3.
28.3% chance the dealer busts. 50% chance of you stay after your first two cards.
Yep.
So right off the bat, you have 0.5 times 0.28. You have 0.14. So 14% is the lowest. Everything else that you win after hitting once, or you being better than dealer, is gravy.
Yeah.
Which probably isn't a super high percentage.
It's not. I'm going to tell you that right now. It's not.
But I'm going to say it's going to be 18.3%.
All right.
That's my prediction.
Marcus has his guess, and
Pretty precise.
it's quite precise.
Well, it makes it much more impressive when I get it right. And if I'm slightly off, people don't expect me to get it slightly right. So adding the extra decimal point is really only beneficial to me.
I'm going to do the Price is Right thing and say 18.4%.
You can come up with your own idea, Chris, and fuck the
No,
F
I'm
off.
glad that you did that, because Chris edits this podcast. So I'm going to go ahead and say this right now. If his isn't 18.4% and like, you know, everything he just said, that means he changed his guess to the right one. Don't believe his lies.
Yeah, I can't change what Ben just said. Ben said the answer I said.
Chris is the best,
you just-
and I think that he is my best friend.
Why don't you just say the next 10 numbers after that too?
Should we feed you audio samples, Chris?
Yeah.
We'll cut out for a minute and just feed you audio samples.
Just say
Right.
numbers.
Anyway, that's kind of the end of my answer. Don't gamble, both in general and also specifically if you flip coins every time. Chris, what'd you do?
So, obviously, if you had to make decisions based on a coin flip, it would affect your life a lot. So, I wanted to see if you could somehow either predict the outcome or control the outcome of a coin flip. And both of you were looking at if the coin flip was 50-50, like truly 50-50. I want to see if that was actually true. So, there's this one guy, his name is Percy Diaconis. And he like analyzes coin flips and other statistic stuff, but he's known for the coin flip thing. And he said that a coin flip is not necessarily like a random event. It's a deterministic process. So like if you know the initial speed and you know how fast it's turning, then you can predict the outcome. But it's obviously pretty hard to know those initial conditions. So he analyzed the mechanics of the coin flip. And he saw that it doesn't actually flip around its axis of symmetry. What it does, it actually precesses, which precession is like the axis of rotation is actually rotating itself. So like if you imagine like a top and the top starts to get wobbly, that means it's precessing.
Okay.
So if it was flipping, analyzing a flip is just like a 2-parameter analysis. It's pretty simple. But analyzing a precession is a 12-parameter analysis. So it got way more complicated. You had to measure like the distribution of angular momentum, and it got like super complicated. But he said he did it, and
but he said he did, and we believe him.
yeah, I believe him because I didn't want to
Do it myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what he found was that a coin flip actually isn't truly 50-50. So there's like a 51% bias towards one side, and it's not specifically towards tails or specifically towards heads. There's a 51% bias towards whatever side you start on top.
Huh.
So if you see someone flipping a coin and you see that heads is on top, if you guess heads, you have a 51% chance of winning.
That'll show him. That'll get him every time.
And he said that's like a stable bias, like a reliable thing that happens every time. But that's if you like catch it. If he didn't let it drop, he caught it in midair. I'll get to the dropping later. I'm going to cover that later. But 51% bias helps you a little bit. Obviously not a lot in predicting the outcome or controlling what you want to do. So that was the analysis of what they call a fair coin. But there is such a thing as a biased coin, which is basically just a coin that significantly favors one side. So like, how do you make a biased coin? One way to do it is to make one side heavier than the other. Or that was like the question I had. Could I make a coin heavier than on one side and the other not as heavy? And would that bias it? And there's
Right.
a paper that someone wrote. I think there's a few people wrote it, but the paper is called "You Can Load a Die, but You Can't Bias a Coin." And in the paper, he talks about his students. He teaches like statistics, and he had his students. He gave them the goal of modifying a die and modifying a checker piece, and their goal was to encourage bias on both of those. So what the students did was they sanded down the edges of the die to influence the die, and they had like sticky putty that they stuck onto one side of the checker to weight that side of the checker. And the results were that they were able to influence the die and make it land on a specific side. And for the checker, they were able to influence if they spun the checker, then the putty side would land down just because it's heavier.
What, spun or flipped?
Spin. So like if you spin like a top on a table,
Okay.
you spin it. And you can actually do this with a penny too. A penny, Lincoln's head actually weighs heavier than the Lincoln Memorial on an American penny.
But not in real life.
Not in real life.
In real life, the Lincoln Memorial is much, much heavier.
Yeah. So if you spin a penny, it's actually going to land tail side up 80% of the time.
Really?
Yeah.
Now that is something useful to trick people with.
That is useful, but not in our case because we cannot spin it. We have to flip it. So what they found was that when they flipped the checker piece, there was no bias at all. That bias kind of disappeared from the spin. And to demonstrate this, the difference between the spin and the flip a little more, there's a guy named Edwin Thompson Janes, and he did an experiment with a pickle jar lid. He called the top of the lid heads and the bottom of the lid tails. And he spun it 100 times, and he flipped it 100 times. And when he spun it, it landed heads 0 times. And that's because if you think of a pickle jar, it's basically like a hollow disc, but one side is missing.
Mm-hmm.
So the center of gravity is shifted towards the top. So that side is heavier, and it falls that side. But then he flipped the jar lid, and it landed on heads 54 times. So no bias at all. It's basically just 50%. And that was also catching the lid / coin instead of letting it drop. So you can't bias a coin if you catch it, but can you bias a coin if you let it drop? So there's a guy named John Edmund Curich who did an experiment in 1941. And he flipped a coin and let it bounce on a cloth, like on the ground or on a table or something. He let it bounce. And he flipped a fair coin 10,000 times. There's a lot of times.
Yeah. Some people needed better things to do with their lives.
Yeah, well, it was 1941. I don't know what was going on then, but he was probably pretty bored.
War mostly.
Some people were pretty busy. Yeah.
He was not busy. Actually, I think he was like a prisoner or something. He was doing this in a cell.
That makes sense, actually.
So he flipped a fair coin 10,000 times, and it got fair results. It landed on heads 5,067 times, so basically 50%. And then he made a biased coin, which was he took a wooden disc and then he coated one side with lead, so that side's heavier.
From his jail cell, I imagine.
Yeah, I don't know how he did that from a jail cell, like how he coated it, but he got lead somehow.
Hi, can I have some molten lead? Can you just dip this in molten lead, please? I need to
Yeah.
continue my coin experiments.
Oh, maybe they were interested in the experiment. He flipped that 1,000 times because I guess he didn't want to do 10,000 again.
It's fair. Yeah.
And it landed on heads 679 times. So there is a slight bias when he let it bounce, and is approaching 68%. So why is this? So there is that bias when it spins, and when you let it drop, some of that spin bias goes into the flip, so something like that.
It makes sense to me in my head. I have no idea how to explain it.
I don't know how to explain
Right.
it, but
Like, I imagine if it hits a bounce and then like, no, I'm gonna stop because I was thinking ahead of my next words and they didn't make any sense.
I mean, if you imagine a coin flipping and hitting the ground, a lot of the times it does end up spinning, and it ends up in a spin. So
That's
there's
true.
some sort of spin influence on it. So that's one way to influence a coin and get bias out of a coin if you want to control your outcome. Another way is to actually bend the coin. That's if you let it bounce as well. So if you bend the coin, there was one guy that bent he bent like 6 coins at different increments, and he flipped each of them 100 times, And the flat one landed heads 53 times, obviously. That's what you expect. One of the coins that was bent about 90 degrees landed on heads 41 times. And then one of the coins that was bent basically so that the ends were parallel with each other, that landed on heads 27 times. So obviously that's pretty big bias. And to basically just guarantee the outcome of your flip, you could just bend the coin so that the ends are touching.
Yeah, and then you just have a. Does that count as a coin? Does it count as a coin if you have a half piece?
It's still a coin, I think.
You've gone from pizza to calzone.
Yeah.
Would you still call it the same name?
I don't know. That's up to you whether you count that or not. I count it.
That's up to you, the listener, to decide if you would count this in your hypothetical situation.
I count it. Vending machines don't.
Yeah, you can't use the coin, but you don't want to use the coin because you need it to make decisions.
I don't count it. My guy at the bank looks at me funny every time I bring him stuff.
So that's basically that's the way you can guarantee your outcome. And the last thing I want to look at, I wanted to try something. So I'm going to flip a coin. And Ben, heads or tails?
Heads.
Okay, what about you, Marcus? Tails or heads?
Heads.
Okay. I'm not actually going to flip a coin, but...
What? You liar.
I wanted to see what you guys would answer. So Ben, I feel like Marcus's answer was kind of influenced by Ben's answer a little bit. Usually the results that I found are like isolated. But what people say is that when you ask someone heads or tails, 80% or 79% of the people pick heads. And the reason that is because you're presenting the question as heads or tails. You're saying heads first. So when I asked Marcus, I said tails or heads, but I don't know what was going on there.
So I like to say, so me, this is my brain work in action. I like to say heads because I like to just make the one that's positive for me heads, because I don't want to get excited about heads and then realize I'm wrong and lose.
Okay,
so
that's weird.
It's just straight social anxiety influences my picking coin flips.
So what they found was in this study that they did, 79% people picked heads, and they rephrased the question so that heads wasn't first. They didn't say tails or heads. They said enter T for tails and H for heads, just because if you say tails or heads, it kind of sounds weird.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it's so ingrained in our minds.
Right.
And when they phrased it like that, 69% picked tails instead of heads when it was introduced first.
Well, T is an easier letter to write.
So obviously the terms like heads or tails, that's a cultural term that we're used to. So they actually found that has an influence over you. Just using the terms heads and tails has an influence over you. And maybe that's why Marcus picked heads, is because he has that cultural influence.
It's the cultural voodoo on my brain.
Yeah, so to take out that cultural bias, they did it again with, instead of heads and tails, they said orange and purple. Or purple and orange, like alternate. And what they found was between 80 to 92% picked the first choice. I don't know why they gave a range for the percentage that time, but they did.
The study seems to be getting worse and worse as far as like integrity goes.
So, I mean, 80%, even if it's the lower end of that range, that's pretty good bias towards the first choice.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So I don't know. We didn't really determine like how you assign what's heads and what's tails for your choices. I think Marcus did like positive and negative, but if it's not necessarily like, if one of the choices isn't necessarily positive or negative, what do you do? I was thinking like if it was up to someone else to assign that, then you could influence them by presenting the choice that you want first to them, and then they would choose that.
You know what might bias if I was giving you a heads or tails, might bias my choice?
What?
Is seeing your folded in half coin with tails on the outside. That might bias whether I say
mean,
heads
you
or
don't have to show them the coin ahead of time. But yeah, once you have them assigned to whatever you want, you just take out your folded coin, and it's guaranteed to land on heads or tails depending on how you folded it. And that's how you choose what you want when you have to flip a coin.
Awesome. You have undid the hypothetical entirely.
I did. That was my goal.
Now you're just the guy with the weird bent coins. He flips them all the time. That's a way better person to be. It probably is the sad thing.
Yeah, it probably is. At least they're not in some like long 28-date relationship that they did not really want to sign up for or similar.
Right.
But all right. So then everyone take your loaded die or your bent coin and set it to heads to continue the rest of the podcast as we get into our Would You Rather question.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, that doesn't...
Did not make any
What
sense.
does that
No. What did you...
I want everybody at home to flip a coin in half so that it's always going to be heads, and then say heads is continue listening to our next bit,
okay.
Okay.
which is after the sting. All right, Ben, I think it is your turn to be the first person to do the Would You Rather question. Would you rather be covered in wool or covered in scales? So would you have a sheep, wool, or like lizard scales?
Okay, I have questions about each of these.
I imagined you might.
Okay, if it's wool, does it grow continuously? And if not, how thick is it?
I would say it grows like a sheep does.
Okay.
So it grows continuously at about the rate
Of
and
a sheep.
thickness of
Yeah,
sheep.
that makes sense. Okay. For scales, do you shed your skin?
Ooh, yes. Annually. Annual shedding.
Okay. So I think scales has less of an impact on your life, aside from that whole shedding your skin thing, which admittedly
Which
is
only
a little,
happens once a year.
happens once a year, but it's pretty off-putting. But you do have a cool like cast of yourself when you're done,
Make a statue of yourself.
right? So that's
I would
kinda
say you
neat.
could make like a shirt. You could like use your discarded scales as like shirts and things, but because they would fit perfectly, except they wouldn't because they'd be slightly too small.
Slightly too small, exactly.
Which unfortunately is the wrong direction to go.
Right.
Hand-me-downs?
I guess, yeah.
Save them for your kids.
Like if you have kids that are like, 2 years apart,
You'd have to
could
wait.
you have like
Oh. This isn't does your kid do this, it's do you do this? I guess if they have your DNA.
Yeah, I guess it wouldn't matter for the kids. So
You could save it as a hand-me-down for when they're your age.
that'd be a lot of saving.
Here's kind of the way I see it, is that the wool is going to be annoying a lot of the time, and the scales is not going to be annoying that much of the time. But people are
Yeah.
going to love hanging out with you if you're covered in wool.
It also depends on where you live, too.
So wool is actually surprisingly like more breathable than you expect it to be if it's not like super thick. You'd have to shear yourself pretty frequently. That's a weird sentence to say.
I mean, how fast is wool growth? Is it basically like a hair, like haircuts?
How often do you shear a sheep?
Because I cut my hair like once a month.
I feel like it's more often than that. But I think it wouldn't be more than like weekly.
Most sheep breeds need to be sheared at least once a year, although some breeds have wool that grows faster and needs shearing twice a year.
Okay, so it's not
No,
that
that's
fast.
not
actually.
fast at all.
Wow,
So
that's
it's easy to maintain.
a bit of a letdown. Do we want to say it grows faster than that?
Do we want to just assume? Well, the thing is, that's turning into a big old sheep. That's a lot.
That
of
is
wool.
true. That's a lot of wool. So you'd probably want to, for comfort's sake, shear more frequently than that. So you'd stain very easily if you were covered in wool too. Man, it's tough.
Oh, you would never get dry after a shower, ever.
Actually, once again, surprisingly, wool dries out pretty quickly.
Why do you know all these wool facts?
I have wool stuff to run in.
What?
Yeah, because it's super breathable and actually does like wick moisture very well.
You wouldn't think that, though.
No, yeah, exactly. Well, because when you think of wool, you think of like a
how did
sheep.
you learn that?
Wouldn't it be warm and stay wet, Ben?
No, because it's not that thick. It's a very thin layer of wool. So as long as you kept yourself pretty well shorn, which seems like it wouldn't be that difficult to do, you'd actually have great moisture wicking properties and stay very cool and be very huggable. This seems pretty good, actually, the more I talk about it.
Okay, but I feel like once you put clothes over the wool, you start having issues.
It's a base layer, just built in.
Well, the thing is, like, I feel like wool can be breathable, but I feel like if you put a less breathable layer on top of the wool, like a t-shirt, you've now created like a warm oven.
But you see,
double layer insulation.
The wool wicks the moisture away from your skin into the t-shirt, so you stay cooler. It's perfect. It's gold.
I'm more worried about having like you have a layer that's less permeable, and then you have like fluff. You've made like an insulated pillow.
Yeah, you also, I'm not gonna lie, you're gonna pick up smells, which isn't ideal. You'll probably have to go through a lot of shampoo.
Are there any positives for the scales other than that there aren't that many negatives?
I think that's the main one.
No, there's some like scales are pretty tough. Like so like you don't have to worry about like paper cuts or like stupid injuries. Mosquitoes, no mosquitoes on
Oh,
scales.
yeah.
That's fair.
That's a pretty big one right there.
Your skin's always going to feel dry, though. I think you're going to be itchy.
Yeah, so yeah, the problem with the scales is other people touching you.
Also that.
Like, people want to hug you when you're covered in wool. People will hug you when you're covered in scales, but people might not want to, like, cuddle with you.
I
if
guess
you're
it's just
covered in
personal
scales.
preference whether you want to get touched or not.
I mean, if it's binary, I'd rather be touched than not touched ever.
Right.
And I mean, it's not like you're gonna get touched, like, by... Well, you might be touched by strangers sometimes, but, like, you can tell them not
Yeah,
to.
people will be respectful if you ask them not to.
I just am still not buying that wool is going to be a cooling factor or, like, comfortable in the summer.
I mean, I trust Ben's judgment on this. He seems to know a lot about wool.
He seems a little wool-headed to
That's not a qualifier I ever expected to hear about myself, but and like I'm like if it gets out of hand, yes, it will get warm, but I think that you just get like a nice pair of clippers and, you know, you keep yourself good and groomed, and it's pretty manageable. I don't know.
Now, would you shear yourself, or you'd probably have to hire someone else to shear you? Right?
There's parts of you couldn't shear, and that sounded weirder than I meant for it to.
I mean, if you have like a barber's razor, you could shear yourself.
If you want to look good, like everything on your back.
Right, the
you
back
can't really
is kind of tricky.
I mean, you might need someone for, like, the very center of your back, but I could if you have a razor with, like, those, the plastic heads, you can reach it.
You can reach it, but you can't make it look good.
You can make it look good. Razors are like they're set to a thickness.
I mean, I've never tried to cut my own hair, so I don't know.
Well, I mean, if you're at the barber and they have the plastic buzz spacer,
Yeah, I know the buzzy things, the buzz guards.
it's just against their head. It's just against your head.
But still, even sometimes they get it uneven.
So I think the biggest benefit of wool is that conceivably you could, like, get a razor and full on shave your entire body and be a admittedly hairless but pretty regular person for a brief period of time.
Wait, so do you not have your normal hair
Well, you
anymore?
have to shave it all off at the same time. Like,
Well, whatever your I guess you could keep your head. I feel like with scales you would have your head. Would you have your head hair with scales? Probably not. I guess you would replace your head hair, because I can't imagine the neck interface making any sense with hair in either case.
Yeah.
God, so you'd be entirely hairless too? This is getting worse and worse, guys.
Well, you can keep a wool fro.
Right.
Yeah, I guess with the wool you can make it look like you have hair.
Right. But well, except for anywhere else on your body.
Yeah.
Which some people just keep themselves hairless anyway.
Right. It's true.
You just gotta be a bodybuilder.
Wear long sleeves. Take up swimming. You'll be fine.
You're getting very, very close to the Pokemon fan art I've been seeing of the new sheep Pokemon.
I don't want to know about this.
Let me see if it comes up immediately.
I don't want to
I'll
know
Google
about this. Let's
images.
look it up.
Of course he is.
Yeah, let me add this to our Discord chat.
Wasn't there already like multiple sheep Pokemon before?
There's at least one that I know of.
There's an electric one, right?
Yeah, I don't know the names of the new Pokemon,
I don't either.
but I know that there's a sheep one.
Isn't there like a cake one now too or something?
There's a Chandelier one. I think it's just named Chandelier.
Well, that seems lazy of them. Anyway, we should probably make a decision
Yeah.
on this wool and scales thing.
My vote is for wool.
I'm gonna go wool. I don't think of any benefits of scales.
I'm so torn. I can't imagine being anything but uncomfortable being covered in wool. I'm gonna have to go scales. They're not great. They got some cons, but it's just
You don't trust Ben's wool facts.
I don't trust that I'm not just gonna be hot and sweaty all the time and gross. And I don't want to shave my entire body that regularly.
I guess that's reasonable, but
Scales seems low maintenance, and you know what? There's gonna be some girls out there that are super into the scales.
man,
somewhere,
are there
somehow.
though?
There's gonna be more girls that are into the wool.
As someone who just came back from a Comic-Con convention, answer yes.
Okay, fair point.
So I think that'll do it for that. Would you rather?
It was a weird one.
Yeah, it was a bit. It got a bit weird.
Got a
I don't
little
even know where
weird.
the question came from, because it just came out of my brain like fully formed and into the sheet.
How does that make you feel, Marcus? You birthed this. You made this happen.
I'm just gonna chalk it up to having a weird day. And that said, if you want more of Marcus's great weird days in audio format, then please leave our podcast a review on the iTunes, on the Google Play, on the Stitcher, on the other podcast platforms, wherever podcasts are sold. Having reviews and puts us up in the search results, lets us find more new listeners, lets us keep making the show for you that we all love to do. So please, please, please leave us a review. Let us know if we're doing a good job. And if we're not doing a good job, well, you've probably stopped listening before this point anyway, and you won't leave us a review at all. So, tricked you.
Ha! Foolproof system.
Foolproof system.
We rigged the game.
End of the episode.
You have to say next week's questions.
I'm getting there, Jesus.
You said end of the episode.
No, at the end of the episode. He was saying it was at the end of the episode.
So, catch us next week when we answer the following question. Which soda mascot would win in a fight?